It's been a while since I've shared an XRP price prediction on this channel, but as XRP has been rallying really hard and breaking for some new local highs to the tune of $3.65 across most exchanges, we've had countless new investors and even subscribers reaching out and asking us, just how high is XRP going to pump in 2025? So in this video, I'll be giving you the best possible, most thorough, most data dependent, and realistic price prediction for XRP in 2025. And my goal is to set you up to sell closer to the top of this bull market cycle using every tool we have at our disposal. In the first part of this video, I'll be dispelling some rumors that circulate in crypto communities and set the record straight so you have the best possible shot at winning this bull market cycle. Because every single cycle, we see a large group of crypto investors who round trip their bags and essentially give back all of their gains because they were waiting for higher prices and never even had a strategy for taking profits off the table. In other words, there is a point in time in which diamond handing a bag will actually hurt you more than help you. But this is because nobody knows where the top is. You don't know, I don't know, nobody knows. And if we did, everyone would be rich. And as well-known investor and advisor to presidents who is well-known in the finance community, a guy by the name of Bernard Baruch once famously said, "Only liars are in the markets during the good times and out of the markets during the bad times." But that's what this video is for, to give you the best tools to get out of the markets before the bad times come and close to the XRP top. Now, what qualifies me to share an XRP price prediction with you? Aside from the fact that we have a very large YouTube channel with many subscribers, which means they found value in the information we share. Well, in this video, it's not just that, it's the fact that I actually take a cold, hard, math and data rich approach to using all of the expertise that I've gained over the last decade of investing in crypto. And now, having been through 4 bull market cycles, I'm telling you that's enough to see some of the same patterns. And even though every cycle is different, they all share similar traits. As the old saying goes, history doesn't usually repeat, but it rhymes. Then I'll actually dive into the hard numbers behind XRP, like its supply, its potential market caps, and some outcomes which are truly unpredictable but will inevitably affect the price. I will also be giving you extreme bull targets, mid-range targets, and even conservative targets using predictions not just of my own, but also from that of CZ Binance and Pantera's CEO, among others. Then close to the end of the video, I'll give you my 3 pieces of best advice. In other words, the surefire ways on how to know XRP has topped out this cycle and when to take profits. And I'll even give you one valuable resource to download near the end of this video as a great XRP price selling reference, but you have to stick around to the end. So stay tuned because we have a lot to cover. And before we dive in, check out this video from our very own Nick Anderson from the Bull Runners channel and register to join our free live 3-day event to learn how to turn your crypto portfolio into a daily cash flow generator.
Hey, what's up, my friend? Nick here. Quick heads up for all you smart investors watching this. If you love to see your crypto actually working for you, earning passive income every single day on your coins, we're putting together something really cool. On July 20th, we're running our first ever free online event challenge. It's called the Crypto Passive Cash Flow Challenge. And it's basically 3 days where you'll learn our DeFi strategies we use to safely earn passive yield on our coins 24/7, even while we sleep. And some people are doing crazy numbers with this strategy alone. And if you had some coins that you're just holding on to, you should join us and discover how to put them to work. We've never done anything like this publicly before, and we probably won't ever do it again. So it's completely free, but we might have to limit spots to keep the quality high and give everyone proper attention with the size of our YouTube channel, over 360,000 subscribers now. So if you want in, just click the link below this video, grab your spot while you can, and now back to the video.
So be sure to click the very first link in the description or the pinned comment down below to register for this live event that we're hosting from July 20th through the 22nd. And again, it's absolutely free, and I guarantee that the information you're going to learn on the other side has the potential to change your financial situation forever. That said, if you are watching this video at any point in time past those dates, no worries. Still click that link and add yourself to the waiting list in case we ever decide to host another event exactly like this. And as we always do on this channel, if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel, my friend. If you're new here, my name is Paul and you can find me on Twitter or at PauliDeFi, PauliDeFi. The first rumor I want to dispel, and this is definitely just before we get into the actual charts, or better yet, our price predictions for something like XRP into the end of the year and actually through the rest of the bull market cycle, which could last through into 2026, I have to dispel some rumors. And one of those rumors, or better yet, those ridiculously held common beliefs among many XRP investors and actually just people in crypto, is this term that market cap doesn't matter. This is a phrase used by suckers, sold to suckers in order to sell hopium to people who hold a bag bias. What this means is if you're an investor in an asset and you bought it at a certain price, let's just say you first entered XRP at $3. Now you have a bag bias because you're holding this thing. Your financial situation is completely dependent on the performance of XRP. But because you also bought it at $3, you have a price bias. If XRP goes to $2, then it looks cheap because you bought it at $3. And then at $5, it looks expensive. But to someone who entered XRP, let's say at $1, your $3 entry is expensive and they are massively in profit. Humans are interesting. We constantly seek out information that confirms our point of view or bias. It's called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, and is essentially selective attention in the same way that when you buy a car of a certain color, all of a sudden you start seeing it or recognizing it far more often on the road. However, the current market cap for the entire crypto market is sitting at about $3.88 trillion. Then you have the largest market cap for any crypto at $2.3 trillion. And XRP recently just popped that $200 billion mark, still less than 10 times the size of Bitcoin. And so if someone says market cap doesn't matter, it's not that market cap is of supreme importance and the only indicator that we should ever think about or worry about. It's just that in times of thin liquidity and high demand, the prices of assets can be driven far above their fair value. In other words, according to Investopedia, market cap is literally the current market value of all of a company's outstanding stock shares. And in the case of something like XRP or crypto, you can see that the price of XRP is $3.42. Why is it $3.42? Simple, because people in the market are willing to pay $3.42. But let's assume in the same manner that I held this stock or this XRP token at $3.40 and I tried to sell it to someone and there are no buyers. Eventually, if I'm in profit, I'm totally happy to take $3.30. If there are no buyers at $3.30, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna lower my asking price to $3.20 and so on and so forth until I do find buyers or demand. In other words, this is basic supply and demand economics. That is how markets work. And so the reason that the market cap is $202 billion is because if you were to take this and divide it by this amount right here, $3.42, you would come out to the total outstanding shares of 59.2 billion XRP. In other words, market cap does matter even when there are situations of low liquidity and high demand. The price will skyrocket really hard, but eventually it comes back down to meet a fair value in which the majority of participants are willing to buy and sell that product at. And that's all market cap literally is. It's just the total amount of money in one asset at any given time. Again, if someone said market cap doesn't matter, well, then it seems to matter for virtually every single asset on planet Earth. Gold being the largest by market cap at 22.55 trillion. But then you have companies like Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple. Guess what they all have? Market caps, again, they don't matter. Total crap. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is the sixth largest market cap product in the world, and we're lucky because it's similar to a digital gold or a store of value. And so I expect it to get above virtually all companies on earth. And as Bitcoin does, it's going to lead the way for many cryptos to follow, which are going to operate very similar to companies. Because unlike Bitcoin, most cryptos are completely and totally dependent on a team. For example, Ripple is the company behind the XRP token. They are the creators and founders. Guess what they hold? The majority of that max supply of 100 billion tokens. In other words, they can actually start to sell those tokens into the market to earn returns for their shareholders. And as the CTO, David Schwartz, once said, you better believe that XRP, or better yet, Ripple, is going to act in the best interest of its shareholders. In other words, market cap is simply, or the larger the market cap, is simply an indicator of the level of demand in the global market. And no asset is immune to these really strong pumps or velocity in the price if there is demand. But what goes up really hard usually also comes down really hard. And we've witnessed this in the past. We witnessed this in 2018. We witnessed this in 2022. And guess what? It's likely eventually we're going to witness it again. Maybe we're not going to see an 80, 90% dump again, but we might see a 70 to 60% dump. We simply don't know, which is why I'm making this video, to prepare you for what comes next and to give you some really strong price targets that you can start to take some profits into. And again, none of this is considered financial advice. It's just lessons that I've learned over the years. And so what I'd like to do is give you a live example of how market cap or total money in a market makes it easier or harder to move. It's literally just physics in a market. The bigger the market, the harder it is to move with the same amount of money. In other words, if we have $1 trillion market, $1 billion is not enough to really move that market seriously. Yes, it'll move, but you would need multiple billions of dollars. If you have, for example, $1 billion market and you run about $100 million through that market, that would be considered illiquid for the type of money you're trying to move. In other words, you're going to move the market of $1 billion with $100 million. Case in point, we have a $2.3 trillion market cap for Bitcoin. We have about a 10 times smaller market for XRP. And then if I were to scroll down to, let's say, a number 13 by market cap, SUI, this thing's only sitting at about $14 billion, which is far smaller than XRP. Now, what's really interesting is if I were to pull those charts up, right now I have the price chart of XRP up, and we're looking at the local low back on Sunday, June 22nd of this year at about $1.90, and up here we're seeing the all-time high, or at least this local high of $3.66. And what you're going to notice here when I pull up Bitcoin is that Bitcoin, and let me go ahead and make sure that it's on a percentage-based scale, moved a lot less. What's interesting is that they both seem pretty correlated, right? Right here, Bitcoin started dumping, XRP dumped. XRP pumped, which is the price chart. This purple line is Bitcoin. Bitcoin pumped a little. And then they both kind of flatlined a bit, and now they started to rally and picked up momentum between July 9th all the way up to July 11th. Now, in this point in time, XRP is starting to deviate and really started to fly, but you'll notice they're pretty highly correlated. However, Bitcoin is only up 20%, while XRP is up 77%. And yes, XRP has a lot of demand, but in the most recent period right through here, you'll see a smaller market cap was actually easier to fly. For example, you see SUI consistently, which is denoted by this, I don't know, kind of like a pinkish line, started pumping harder. Again, very highly correlated to XRP. Both pumped right here, both dumped right here, both pumped right here. And you'll notice that although XRP has outperformed it over the last few days, generally speaking, because SUI is a far smaller market cap and it's still a very good crypto, it's also pumped and rallied stronger simply because it's easier to move with the same amount of money. So let me get to my point here. In other words, the crypto market has a leading indicator, and that is Bitcoin. In the same way, the stock market's leading indicator, or better yet, its benchmark, is the S&P 500. If the S&P 500 is really suffering, 9 times out of 10, most stocks in the entire market are also suffering. And that's because it is the market, which is why we want to watch Bitcoin. If you watch Bitcoin and Bitcoin starts to break down, then chances are within a month or two, the rest of the crypto market's going to break down, which is why now I'm going to share 3 key indicators you can look out for in order to know when Bitcoin tops off, so that way you can get ready to start taking profits on something like XRP. And it's important to remember that the altcoin market tends to rally after Bitcoin. A lot of those profits that are made on Bitcoin start to rotate into altcoins and usually the best performers. So that said, XRP is likely next in the playbook, which means you usually want to wait about a month, maybe 2 months. And whenever you start to see a lot of weakness in Bitcoin, just be prepared to see that weakness follow through into XRP a bit later. So now what I want to do before I dive into those indicators is just give you some end of cycle price predictions from some major players in the crypto space. For example, you have the founder and CEO, or used to be the CEO of Binance, CZ, talking about what he believes will happen this cycle for Bitcoin.
What do you think the price of Bitcoin tops at this cycle?
Oh, again, very difficult question. Somewhere between 500K to $1 million, I think.
Then you have a major asset manager, $800 billion in assets under management, Bernstein, saying that a $200,000 price prediction for Bitcoin is considered conservative. And you even have Pantera's Capital CEO, which is a major crypto investment firm, mentioning live on CNBC's Squawk Box how he thinks Bitcoin is going to $745,000. So yes, these targets are all over the place, and trust me, we're going to help you to make sense of it all and how that's going to relate to XRP. And then we're going to give you that downloadable document and all this other stuff. But let's have a listen to what he shares.
You bet your life it's not going to zero?
I used to tell people it could definitely go to zero to try and be, conservative. I don't think it's possible now. 50 million people in the U.S. own it, 300 million people globally. BlackRock and Fidelity are selling it. Like, it really has reached escape velocity.
But you're 745,000. I mean, I heard 13 million from Michael Saylor the other day.
I think it can go, it's going up 3 orders of magnitude since we launched our fund. I think it could go up a fourth. And that puts it at 15 trillion market cap, which it still seems relatively small versus 500 trillion of financial assets. That's doable.
Okay.
So how does the Bitcoin market cap matter for the price targets and predictions on XRP? Well, let me explain. If the market cap of Bitcoin continues to dominate and grow and grow and grow, again, much of that is going to find its way into other altcoins that look cheaper like XRP. And ultimately, a growing Bitcoin is going to be very positive for the entire crypto market. But if you're to look right behind me here, on November in 2022, Bitcoin market cap dominance has consistently increased from those lows of 38 cents all the way up to 38%, all the way up to 66%, and currently dumped down to about 61%. So let's assume that Bitcoin now maintains this 60% dominance. In other words, for every $1 trillion that enters the crypto market, about 60% of that is in Bitcoin, and 40% of that money is in altcoins, which would be the equivalent of about $400 billion. Well, XRP is going to own a lot of that market cap dominance. Now, what's interesting is there is actually an indicator for that, or better yet, a chart right here called XRP Dominance. And as you can see, XRP Dominance popped off really hard going back in November of 2024 when it saw its first rally into January, all the way up to a $3.40 price target, where it topped off around 5.4%. 5%. Currently, we're sitting at about 5.58%. In other words, of the $3.9 trillion in the crypto market, XRP accounts for 5.58% of the market. That is all of the money in XRP, and that is the equivalent of about a $200 billion market cap. Are you starting to catch my drift? Now, back in the past, when it was the early days in crypto, there was so little competition for all of the money in crypto. XRP was easily one of the most dominant players, and we saw it rally from really low lows in terms of the total dominance of the market all the way up to a dominance of about 20%. So what I'm going to do is take a very conservative approach. If Bitcoin were to hit, let's say, $175,000, and I'll show you these price targets, $250,000, what would the total market cap of the entire market be? What would the entire market cap of XRP be? If the market dominance increased to a certain range, then what would the price be? On low liquidity, what would the price be? I have a whole sheet that I've done all of the work on, so you don't have to, and you'll have some reasonable targets. But as you can see here, XRP has consistently been gaining in dominance, which is really important to note. And so because I don't know what's going to happen, I'm trying to take into consideration all of the possibilities. It's possible that XRP dominance remains flat and stays somewhere here at the 5% level. It's possible that it goes to the 6% level, the 8% level, and potentially even the 12.5% level, which is the mid-range of all of these major tops back in the past, which I think is going to be very difficult for any crypto to dominate more than 12.5% of the entire crypto market, because again, more and more cryptos are now going to enter the space with regulation and clarity. And it's also just true that Bitcoin is going to continue to eat up a lot of capital. So is Ethereum, so will Solana, which wasn't around back here, and all of the other thousands and millions of altcoins and meme coins. So if XRP were to hit, let's say, 12.5% of total market dominance, and Bitcoin hits $1 million, which would put the market cap of the entire crypto market somewhere in the 30 to 50 trillion dollar range, that would be insane. Much less on low liquidity, XRP could really skyrocket to some numbers you would never expect. But is that possible this bull market cycle? Well, let's dive into some of the ways that I think it's going to be reasonable to predict the Bitcoin top this cycle. And again, we might have a mega cycle that's unlike anything we've ever seen before that runs through 2026. But for the sake of this video, I'm focused mostly on 2025. What's going to happen with the price of Bitcoin? What's realistic? So let's dive into some indicators to know when Bitcoin is likely topped off this bull market cycle, which will give you a good indicator of when you should start to think about watching XRP closely or starting to take profits off the table, and alongside the targets that I'm going to share with you in this document that you can download. It's absolutely free by the end of this video. At the end of the day, you can see that Bitcoin consistently has put in new higher highs and higher lows in a very long-term uptrend that consistently goes parabolic when it really rises, something that Raoul Pal calls the banana zone. But the first indicator that is actually one of the best in the game, and arguably the coolest freebie I'm sharing in this entire video, is called the Bitcoin Pi Cycle Indicator. And it should look something like this: Pi Cycle Bitcoin Top Indicator by Bilzerian Candle. All you have to do is go to indicators, type that in, click that guy, and you'll see these little indicators that pop up. Again, if I'm a daily time frame, 3-day time frame, doesn't really matter. We'll go to that daily time frame, and you can see that it consistently picks basically close to the top virtually every single time. And by the way, this isn't something that shows up after the fact. It actually occurs basically on the day of. It's not a lagging indicator. As you can see, within a day or two, it pops up near that top. So it's not like we see all of this history where we know it's a top and then it marks the chart. It actually marks it very close to the day of that it occurs. If I were to do this once again back over here on the 2017 top, which which then a month later marked the top on XRP, you can see that it occurred within a day of. If I were to click right here, it actually occurred the exact top day that Bitcoin topped off. And in similar fashion, it also marked very close to the top back in 2013 and the next cycle at December of 2013, which were very rapid cycles. That said, this is easily one of the best indicators to know when the top is in for Bitcoin and potentially the rest of the crypto market. And as you can see, as of right now, we are not at the top according to this indicator. So now we have the Pi cycle top indicator, and I'm going to give you another indicator called the parabola. And all you have to do is come about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tabs down on the drawing tool section, scroll down until you see curve, and then from there what you're going to do is take the curve and start it at the very bottom of a bear market cycle and then drag it all the way to the top. And the goal is to touch as many points on this chart as possible, even if you get a few times where it looks like it broke down just for about a day on a wick into this range. As you can see, this acted as a very strong support. And although this is not proper 100% technical analysis, typically what happens in a bull market scenario is it starts to take a little while to build some momentum and get people excited and put in some new highs. And then over time, we see more volatility. In this case, we saw about 30 to 40% dumps back down to the bottom of the parabola before rallying for some new all-time highs. And then at one point in time, not only do we see the Pi cycle top, but we also see the price break below the parabola and then remain there and start to dump for a bear market. So in similar fashion, this was the low of the bear market. We did see a nasty bit of volatility in the form of a black swan event back in 2020 during COVID, but ultimately this was the bottom, this was the top. What we're going to do is take that parabola tool, drag it from there all the way and touch as many points as possible. We are dragging through the volatility of this event right here, but as you can see, it nearly works out perfectly, touching back down at the parabola. And again, if you really want to get technical, I would argue all you have to do is drag it just slightly and get as many points as possible. 1, 2, 3, 4, and guess what? 5. We saw the top, we saw a break below the parabola, we saw resistance, and guess what? We basically made the top right here with a bull trap that I would argue was a banker's play. And now yet again, what are we doing? We're going to put in another parabola move. So I'm dragging the tool from the bottom, and I'm not even on a log chart. You can actually do this on log charts or off of log charts, and I'm trying to touch as many points as possible. And as you can see, we did see a few breakdowns right here, but it was a bear trap, and so we broke right back above. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect. All we're focused on is touching as many points as possible before the thing actually breaks down. And so notice right here, I'm kind of neglecting this range right here. I'm trying to get this range here, and then it's totally okay to have a bear trap or two. Let's drag that just slightly lower. And as you can see, this is our parabola for this move. Not only have we not seen the Pi cycle top, we haven't seen a break below the parabola. And then finally, if I remove all these drawings, the last couple of cycles, we've actually seen the fib top off in certain ranges. So let's go ahead and look at those ranges. And we see a law of diminishing returns. Every single new cycle top actually gives you less percentage gains than the previous cycle because guess what? The market cap is bigger. In other words, it's harder to move the Bitcoin market. That won't be the exact same for XRP, considering XRP is a smaller market cap, so it's easier to move, but it's getting pretty dang big. And so my goal is to just drag this all the way across until I see where Bitcoin topped off. I'm taking it from the top of the all-time high in the previous range down to the very local bottom in the bear markets of 2015. And as you can see, Bitcoin put in basically a 2272 on the fib tool. And if I'm on a log scale, I actually have to make sure that this tool, the fib tool, when I click over on style, is actually based on a logarithmic scale. If you're not on a log scale, then don't worry about it. Just keep it as is. Again, similar fashion. I'm just trying to see what's actually going to occur. Right here, we take from the very top of the prior all-time high and then take it to the very bottom of the major range right here. And as you can see, if I drag that all the way across, Bitcoin actually topped off at the pi cycle top at about a 1618 both times when it had its double top. And so I think because this is a mega bull cycle, we're at least going to see the 1618 yet again, if not even higher, considering we now have institutional and federal support. A 1618 range would take us up to about $175,000. And I would argue, just because it's a nice whole round number, it's very much possible that Bitcoin actually hits $250,000 this bull market cycle. So these would be my personal targets for 2025 if this thing rallies all the way through December. And that wouldn't be unheard of, considering Bitcoin's already hit about $123,000. And from today's current price, that would be another 46% gain to about 100% gain. Bitcoin is no stranger to 100% gains. And by the way, if Bitcoin were to hit, let's say $175,000, now we're going to take into consideration what is going to be the market cap of an XRP in that same period of time. If it was 5% of the market, 6% of the market, 8% of the market, 12% of the market, and if it had low liquidity as well. All right, so what I did is actually put a spreadsheet together for you called XRP Price Projections by the Bull Runners, and all you need to do is click that Google Forms link below, enter your email address and name, and then you'll be sent directly over to this page where you'll always have a cheat sheet to know what to do with XRP and the price targets to look out for based on the price of Bitcoin. Right here, you can see the Bitcoin price. We have a Bitcoin market cap dominance of about 60% across the board. In other words, if the total market cap, so right here on the left side, you'll see that we would have our Bitcoin price at the top of a bull market. And I gave you about 6, 7, 8 different scenarios for each price. As you can see, we have 8 different scenarios. If Bitcoin hits a price of $175,000, that would put Bitcoin's market cap at about $3.45 trillion, which is actually the current size of the crypto market right now. The total market cap of everything in the crypto market would be about 5.75 trillion. And so if XRP, so let me explain this really quickly. We have a chart, or better yet, a bunch of data sets on the Bitcoin price, the total market cap of everything in crypto. If Bitcoin, and we're assuming Bitcoin's going to remain around 60% of the total market dominance. In other words, 60% of 5.75 trillion is 3.45 trillion. At the same time, if XRP was 5% of this 5.75 trillion, that would put the market cap of XRP at $287 billion, which would leave XRP at about $4.84 at a market top if Bitcoin was 175,000. And I gave 8 different scenarios for $175,000. I gave 8 different scenarios for a $250,000 Bitcoin. And again, it's important to pay attention to Bitcoin as it's the mothership. So this is all really valuable and proper data. And I'm going to go ahead now and share with you my personal predictions on what's going to happen next if XRP circulating supply remains the exact same. And so if you come over here to Coin Market Cap, you click on XRP, you can see that the circulating supply right now is about 60 billion XRP. What would the price of it be if it was this much? However, if we see a lot of overhead supply being dumped into the market by Ripple, let's say another 10 billion XRP were to enter, then that would create a lot of sell pressure, and the demand would need to be able to meet all of that extra supply. And sometimes that just doesn't happen. So I also gave a scenario for all situations where, let's say Bitcoin is at $175,000, but where XRP total supply is now sitting at, or circulating supply is sitting at 70 billion. The market cap would obviously be the same in both scenarios. The only difference is it would actually hurt or harm the price a bit, leaving XRP to pump less so. Now, over on the right-hand side, I give a few scenarios at the 8% market dominance dominance and 12.5% market dominance, where there is a low liquidity or a supply crunch, where the demand is extremely high and there's virtually no liquidity left, leaving the price to skyrocket. That would typically mean that you're actually going to see a far higher market dominance, which is why I only gave that situation and scenario at the 8% level. Now, bear with me. If all of this data is confusing you, the reason I have this highlighted is because I think that this is the most conservative target we're likely going to hit this cycle, considering the XRP dominance has already been skyrocketing, holding its range really well, is a US based crypto, won a lawsuit. Everything is aligned in its favor for it to win, which leads me to believe it's going to hit at least an 8% market dominance. In other words, if the circulating supply remains the same and Bitcoin hits $175 billion, that would put the XRP market cap at $460 billion and would give us a price target of about $775 on the lower end. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to get a low liquidity event where it realistically hits $10.08, which is very close to my personal prediction of about $11 that I've covered in plenty of other videos. And that would just be by the end of 2025. If we see a mega cycle and extreme levels of demand for something like Bitcoin and XRP, then I would think that the total crypto market cap is going to hit at least $8 trillion by end of year. Again, into 2026, we might see a $500,000 Bitcoin and a $13 to $20 to even $45 XRP. However, this year, I think if Bitcoin were to hit $250,000 and the circulating supply of XRP remains the same at about an 8% market dominance, that would give us a price on XRP of about at least $11, and on the high end in the low liquidity event about $14.40, just under that $15 target, and I think that is very much realistic. In the case of mega demand, we're talking a 12.5% market dominance. At the highest end, that would put us at a $20 to $22 XRP. In terms of what I think is most realistic, seeing as we saw a really strong pump off of these lows right here for the about a 600% gain, I would reasonably assume that right off of these lows back down here, we might see at least a 400 to 500% gain, considering this thing really rallies and rallies hard. Now, what's interesting is when I start to get to that 450% gain mark, we're sitting at about $11. What makes this price projection even more interesting, if I were to come over to a chart that has all of the history and take a fib scale, let's zoom out a little bit from the top all the way down to these local lows, again, minus that black swan event that occurred back in March of 2020, you can see that I'm going to touch virtually all of the local lows right here and drag it all the way to current daily prices, where not only did we see a bit of resistance back in January, we're breaking out for the very first time. And what leaves me to believe that we're going to hit at least $11 is the fact that this is the 141 range. And in the case of major demand and a 12.5% market dominance, look at this, almost perfectly aligned with $20. So my personal targets on this super conservative side would be somewhere in the $7 range. Again, the fib tool almost works wonders. And on the very mid range, about $11. On the extremely high range for this bull market cycle, we're talking a $20 token. But let me know, what are your thoughts? Where do you think XRP is going to fly off to this bull market cycle, or at least by the end of the year in 2025? Again, thanks you so much for watching this video and sticking with me to the very end. Again, you can download that Google Sheet by clicking on the Google form link below. Also, be sure to register for that live event or be added to the waitlist. And finally, if this is your first time hearing about it, head on over to altcoinpro.com to check out Altcoin Pro University, your one-stop shop to help you become a crypto millionaire. We can't guarantee you any results, but we have tons and tons of people winning. And again, if you watched any of our past videos, we constantly prove there's a reason that we have almost 1,000 members consistently paying us month after month to be involved in this group. This is no crap. This isn't probably the best crypto education platform on the planet. Not only do we share all sorts of altcoin picks, but anyone can do that, and a lot of these don't actually end up doing too well. Anyone can pick a winner in a bull market. The question is, can they help you to manage your money in a bear market? And that's exactly what we've done. We've showed people how to take advantage of our DeFi yield quick wins to put their money to work for them and earn interest and yield to not only pay for the course and the membership, but to actually earn income on it. And we have tons of members winning. But that's not all. We host tons of live calls every single week. We have tons of courses to teach you things like technical analysis. I host a technical analysis call every single Tuesday for our members. We show you how to get access to the best airdrop alerts and more. So if you want to learn more, go to altcoinpro.com. Thanks so much for watching this video, my friend. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.